Thank you for being with us this afternoon, and let's hear a big shout out for Track A. Yes, Track A, yay, yay. All the way with Track A, yes, yes. Because there is no Plan B. No, just kidding. We're going to hopefully enlighten you and entertain you and challenge you a little bit with a panel on the 5 W's plus the H for how, as in how in the hell is any of this going to get done. So we're going to be yakking away up here for a bit, and then we'll like to reserve some time at the end for questions from the audience, if my panelists would agree to be cross-examined by the folks in the audience. Okay, they seem to be somewhat, yes, they're nodding their heads. Okay. If you need detailed introductions, you've come to the wrong place, because we're not doing that here. We're going to start at this end. Donnie Williams is Chief Digital Officer at Horizon Media. And let's see here. Who else do we got? We got Brian Decker, who's the Managing Director at Mindshare. We have Tim Jenkins, who's the CEO at 4Info. And we have Josh Jacob, who's the President of Accuen. And we are going to have a very lively discussion, if our preview call was any indication of that. And the subject, again, mobile measurement, the 5 W's, plus the H. So I thought we'd start off and talk a little bit about the biggest issue involving the 5 billion smartphones and miscellaneous other mobile devices that are people are clutching as they rush from place to place these days. Somebody says that these are the most addictive devices in the history of devices, and I think that's probably is true. And judging by the amount of effort that's being made by our panelists and by many other people at this conference to try to figure out some of these questions, I think that's also the case on Madison Avenue. One of the things we talked about during the our chat before the panel started was that, and again, I'm sure this came up in some of the other discussions as well, is why has mobile not reached the level of advertising spending reflecting both the ambitions of the mobile marketing companies, the ambitions of the device makers, and of course, reflecting the unbelievable adoption and the rate, the speed of adoption and enthusiasm of adoption among consumers, which seems to have outstripped the ability of a lot of people to keep up with that. So maybe we'll start with Donnie and talk a little bit about that, and the other panelists can jump in and agree, disagree, change the subject, but no singing. That's my only request, is no singing.
So I'm done. All right.
You're going.
I will share my brief perspective on why I'm pleasantly surprised with the adoption of mobile advertising, briefly, and then I will point to a couple specific challenges for our organization, and then I think guys will kind of round it out with some of the measurement obstacles that you're alluding to. So, relatively low base, right? And I think over the past few years we've seen fairly wide adoption, if not massive, or complete adoption across our composition of clients with regard to advertising and or some sort of meaningful marketing initiative within mobile. I think what you're talking about is, why are those average ticket sales $50,000 to $100,000 versus $1 million, $1 million plus, or whatever the upside would be.
Also, it seems from my outside perspective, it also seems that so much of what's being done in mobile is all being done on sort of a project or one-off basis. And it's just like a continuous stream of one-offs and projects rather than sustained campaigns.
Yep, and so the short of it, again, from my optic, two quick things. One, the creative formats, I think, leave a bit to be desired. When you're just looking across countless campaigns, countless creative executions that we require within the digital space. I think it's hard for marketers, generally speaking, to muster up enough resource to really deliver an impactful ad execution. I think that's been a limiter that we've encountered. The second thing is complexity. Some people refer to it as fragmentation. I actually think it's workflow complexity. I think we've stumbled a bit, reminiscent of early online advertising days. Our campaigns haven't always been executed flawlessly. And when you're grappling from a marketer standpoint with what the return on an investment is, and you can point to kind of specific trip-ups through the course of getting a campaign out the door, I think you've given your client too many reasons to kind of not invest, wholeheartedly. On the flip side, again, we're in a pretty great spot right now because there's a real appetite to test and learn. What we're trying to do is get folks to move from test and learn to lay down a real bet in the space, because obviously consumption is there.
Who would like to jump in? Sure. Brian?
I think it's always come down to having a very clearly defined strategy and a return on marketing investment, and that sort of drives, what your investment allocations are. I've worked with clients where 30% of our entire media budgets were going towards mobility devices, inclusive of tablets. On the other hand,
and at this stage of the game, that's a high number or a low number?
That's an extremely high
Extremely
number.
high.
I think the IAB guidelines are suggesting a 7% contribution towards the investment overall. For a lot of our clients, where we're focused more on sort of transactional branding, it could be even less than 1%. A lot of it has to do with challenges, especially in areas like m-commerce, where you're having a great deal of challenges based on the fact that we would all love to be able to measure this the same way we do with display, but the challenges with privacy, the challenging with targeting, attribution, cross-device attribution, the necessity for doing SDKs, for doing in-app tracking, viewability in terms of being able to ensure that you have two-day windows beyond looking at clicks and taps, as well as a number of other issues that are really pretty challenging right now. But we're cautiously optimistic.
I think obviously a lot of people would kill for those problems, because particularly the m-commerce problem, I mean, the idea that the device at the same time can do brand advertising or image advertising, yet at the same time you can buy stuff and it can be extremely transactional. I mean, TV has been striving for that for decades without any success, and other traditional media would give their left particles for.
Was that really what you were about to say?
No, I changed it the last second. I mean, the idea. I mean, it's a wonderful problem to have, the amazing abilities of these devices to complete the sale, not just stimulate demand, but to actually pay off on that demand. And but like you said, it clearly does raise a lot of issues in terms of measurement and compatibility and things that just are really puzzling to a lot of people in the market.
Well, but also I think that there is the creative issue, which was brought up by Josh. If we're still thinking about putting little banners on phones, then we've lost before we've even started. There's a tremendous opportunity to really reinvent what the brand experience can be about.
Do you want to get into that a little, or?
Sure. When we talked about this beforehand, I thought one of the things that I think is really interesting when we talk about formats is that there's been a tremendous push of late around this so-called native advertising, where we're essentially embedding advertising in content, and the native advertising community is coming up with metrics and ways of getting paid on that, and slowly but surely doing the research work to quantify the benefits of what it means to read a headline that's sponsored or read an article that's sponsored and the rest of it. And I think that's an area that becomes really, really interesting for us when we start thinking about the device as a media consumption device and advertising as media, as opposed to a banner that's laying over the top of it or some other thing that's intruding on the user experience. That may turn out to be a much, much more interesting dimension for how we think about doing brand advertising.
And that gets into that whole issue about interruptive versus engagement, and somebody welcoming the ad as information or entertainment versus resenting the ad from keeping them from seeing what they want to see. Or
Well, and I mean, I'll take it a step further. We've been saying this on panels now for a while, that there are three basic questions that the mobile advertising industry has to be able to address in order for us to get massive scale and spend that rivals the attention that devices are already capturing. The first one is we have to be able to tell advertisers how much money should you spend. The second question that we have to be able to answer for them is, who do I take that money away from? The media budgets don't go up every time we come out with a new channel or a new way of advertising. And so at some point, you have to be able to answer to your client, we're going to stop spending as much over here and we're going to put it over here, which gets to question number 3, which is prove it. How can we go back to somebody, and whether it's television that we now are saying, oh, we can do this more transactionally, or it's circulars because we can bring you into the store with a device that's got a coupon on it, whatever else that may be, somewhere, somehow, we have to be able to say, spend this much, take it from these guys, and here's the proof that this dollar is working harder using this channel than it was over here where it was last year.
Just a quick question about that, because I wholeheartedly agree. That is, native advertising specifically, does that help us answer those questions, or does that, does that strengthen the question at hand? Which is kind of where I would lean almost, because it's, it's a new opportunity for marketers to tell a different type of a story and compelling indeed, but it also does feel like just another way to try to solve the riddle, right? Which means more learning, more, and more fragmentation at the end of the day. Right?
I'm hardly an evangelist for the native advertising industry, but I will say the following on this front. For the native advertising industry to take off, they're going to have to do a phenomenal job in research right now, correlating article views with brand metrics like consideration and awareness, and show that they work better in environments where banner fatigue may have kicked in to the point that people aren't seeing ads at all. If they're able to do that, and you're able to come back to me and show me that running targeted content in environment X, Y, and Z against this audience performs better than other forms of digital brand advertising, it is as or more scalable over to mobile than I think any of the other digital formats that we've been working with other than search.
And I think native or branded content works is very alluring in the mobile space because of the idea that people are on there to find things that they want, and if an ad looks like something that you want to read or want to watch, then you're going to jump at it. But the question with that is the same question that takes place with branded content in traditional media like advertorials or infomercials. At what point does the target begin to roll his or her eyes, and then, worse yet, start to resent you for doing what they perceive to be tricking you? And I'm wondering, that's an issue that's come up so much with native advertising and content marketing to date. Yet it's in such an early stage in mobile. I'm fascinated to see where those issues, how that's going to be paid off.
Well, to bring this back to where we think the fundamental problem is in mobile is that's all good and fine, but if you can't measure the actual effect of your campaign at the cash register, who's going to buy, right? So we've been looking at this problem for 2 years, and we set out to build one thing and one thing only, and that's a platform that would enable actual measurement at the cash register. So you can stop out and talk to my team, they're at the booth, but we have created a platform, because I promised I wouldn't sell too much, but we have created a platform that does allow you to do that in mobile. We have found a way to associate mobile devices very specifically with certain household data that's been tied to offline data, very specifically, that can be tied to specific transactions at the cash register. And for the eye rollers out there, we've already done it. We've got campaigns underway. We've seen tremendous results, 400% ROI. We're able to tie transactional data at the frequent shopper level back to the homes. And as we've been out talking to brands, it's been finally, was this day ever going to come where somebody was going to be able to produce something tangible? We've done it for very big brands that have now turned into very large-scale campaigns going forward. So we've been in there, we've talked to them, and God knows I've been on my knees begging long enough to get people to, to open up the wallets and turn this into, a sizable spend. And it was the consistent answer was, when you can prove to me that there's real return, we'll buy.
How much of this is generational? I mean, my feeling is personally that the reluctance to have the ad spending occur in mobile is part of it is complaining about, oh, we can't measure it, there's all these different problems, so on and so forth. But part of it, I think, is just it's a wonderful excuse for people who are more used to traditional media to drag their feet.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking that with the passage of time, with every year that goes by, with every graduating class that comes into agencies like Horizon and Mindshare and other
We're hiring,
agencies,
by the way.
that
Seriously, we're hiring. On the mobile team specifically.
okay, see another commercial. I'm just wondering whether that's going to take care of itself in the course
I
of a
think
couple
it's
of
the
years.
opposite. The
Really?
digital teams are the youngest teams in the agency. They've got 15 devices on their desks and they grew up with them.
Right, but I'm saying it's the people in the marketing side, the Altacacas there who are holding this back. No.
For me, it always comes back to the same thing, which is that the senior level conversations are about media mix, and it's a broad conversation about the overall objectives that we have and how best we can invest their money. What measurement ultimately drives in that is that we don't have good enough stories yet to tell about which specific tactical areas of their marketing activity are being impacted by this more positively than some of the alternatives that are better known and have more mature measurement in place.
I think I would agree with that. I think mobile specifically and a lot of the technology vendors in the space have done a really good job of developing products that deliver against specific marketing needs, tying exposure to a cash register, pushing in-store foot traffic. I think Millennial made an announcement this morning, I believe, if I'm getting that right, about omni-channel, like kind of closed-loop solutions. That's my words, not theirs necessarily. And I think those products are spectacularly valuable for marketers who are looking to achieve an offline result. I think where it falls down is when you're trying to do an investment comparison against other media channels. Unless you have a similar type of kind of a measurement structure in place cross media, oftentimes it's swim lane kind of measurement, it's swim lane marketing, and that's not where we're going.
Yeah, I hear you, and that's exactly where we went with this, and we have some very large partnerships with Catalina and Accuen and DLX, and it was exactly that problem. How do I take and compare this to what I'm getting in direct mail versus display versus mobile? And so we created a common identifier across those platforms, and now it's pretty easy, and we've had a lot of conversations with some very big folks who are saying, you know what, I actually think I'm going to take money out of direct mail. I mean, it's an easy bucket for us digital guys to go after, right? At $500 to $1,000 CPMs, you can go after that, but you have to be able to play with their CRM data, and that's what we can do. So, we haven't tried to tackle the TV problem, because you're never going to get these guys to shake money out of that, at least in my lifetime, which obviously shorter than a lot of your lifetimes, but my lifetime. But we are getting them to move it across different mediums, and one area that is really ripe, quite frankly, is direct mail. So we're seeing a lot of pull from there.
I'll tell you one interesting thing about that is it'd be interesting to see your results by age deciles, because I think back to your point, the probably more interesting thing to some extent is that there's a generation of people who aren't as influenced by television, who have it on in the background and are looking at a tablet at the same time, et cetera. And you may start seeing that the mobile efficacy is much, much higher in 20-something consumers that you're pushing CPG at than 40-somethings. And that's where you start seeing that television mix start to change as you're trying to create brand habits for the next generation of households.
Yeah, I agree, and those are insights that we're now starting to push back through our campaigns, which is exactly what the brands want to see, right? I mean, just don't tell me that the cash register rung, but who rung it and why? And so what lessons can I learn from that? So taking insights beyond the cash register is the next level of this thing for us.
But I think one of the other real issues is always trying to really measure any channel unto itself as its own silo. I think one of the really great opportunities that's coming up that I think we're becoming really very optimistic with is actually how it joins with other channels. You know, how, for example, when you look at Twitter and the recent acquisition of Mopub and Bluefin and Trender, and all of a sudden you have these new measurements of tweets per minute and how that's aligning to not just specific broadcast stations, but specifically down to the program level. And looking at products like Amplify and looking what Nielsen is now trying to do, it's really trying to create a whole nother dimension of metrics that will in fact feed into more classic media mix models.
And obviously, it's in some cases, I think it's a zero-sum game when you're talking about budgets, because in a lot of these companies, there isn't a large amount of growth that they are able to put toward their marketing, their total marketing spending, because of the economy and other issues. But the other side of it is there may be some frenemy-type relationships that get developed, like, for instance, Twitter and their push I think they're having a big push this week, in fact, to talk about how they are a friend of television, of traditional television advertising, the traditional television programming model, whether it's cable or broadcast or whatever. Then they're saying you don't have to abandon 65 years of buying and planning TV to embrace the advertising opportunities that there are with Twitter. They're saying they complement each other. And I think from an outsider perspective, and again, it's probably because of the way mobile has grown separately from other media, it seems that mobile is trying to get in, and like you said, it's a swim lane kind of a thing where it should be much more of an integrated, I hate to say this, 360-degree kind of viewpoint. And do you think that's also going to start to change, or is mobile going to be seen as sort of this brash newcomer who's trying to crash the party?
Well, I think we talk a lot about mobility as opposed to mobile because it's a behavior. And you have about 56 million households that are actually either displacing television, whether it be traditional TiVos or whether it be watching on demand, or whether it actually just be watching it on a tablet or a mobile device. So clearly what you're seeing is some media fragmentation. So this is becoming an extension in terms of ways of being able to really recapture, in certain cases, to the question of where those dollars get allocated from. In certain cases, it may actually be from broadcast itself.
I think there's another area too of fragmentation that's going to become really interesting in the next year to 2 years. Which, you've been sort of talking about the notion of these separate channels, and when we go from the desktop to the mobile environment or the tablet environment, we lose that connectivity. And while it would be nice for the device makers to solve that problem for us, the people who are actually in some ways in the most interesting position to do something about this are people who are on every single one of those devices and the desktop with logged in users. And I think what we may start to see that becomes also challenging is a different kind of fragmentation where it's cross-device, but it's fragmentation between Twitter's identity system and Facebook's identity system and Google's identity system. All of these guys are in a phenomenal position to show us things like cumulative reach, accretive frequency, audience dynamics across those people, behavioral patterns of how people are consuming media, but it's within these horizontal lenses of the users that they see. They're all very high frequency use applications, so they're going to have a lot of data and a lot of media within them. But I think we may be sitting up here next year talking about how do you solve for the problem of duplicative reach between the Twitter ecosystem and the Facebook ecosystem.
I would offer up a very basic media principle also that I'm compelled by, and I would love to get your feedback on. You guys ready for this? All right, no specific feedback allowed. So I kind of go back and forth on this mobile thing a little bit. So we're at the core of it, we're an investment agency, right? As is Accuen and Omnicom, we're trying to figure out how to manage portfolios of investment across channels and derive the best possible result. I wonder if right now, while people are grappling with, and it's a concept that I've shared before, while people are grappling with whether or not there's a real way to prove accountability within the channel, if you can't double down and derive more value from kind of a first movers type of a position within the mobile space, in so much as you can afford yourself some leeway from a measurement standpoint, right? Like if you could, and again, very, very basics here, if you could set your pricing so low that the value you were deriving justified the lack of visibility that you had in measurement and established you for the longer term to continue to succeed as measurement and other obstacles kind of fall by the wayside. And it's a core concept that I'd like to believe we're trying to establish with our own client base right now. But I think if we look back on all the digital medium or the digital marketing initiatives that we've kind of embarked on, most of which have been successful, I think most people, or some people at least, would be like, I wish I had gotten in on that a little bit earlier. I wish I wasn't late to the party, generally speaking. And I think mobile represents a large opportunity there at relatively little cost. So, pulling some of your largest investment, which may be broadcast, local, wherever you're spending your dollars right now, to invest relatively little dollars and derive again the value that can offset some of the lack of visibility. Discuss, guys, discuss. I'm looking for feedback.
Anybody want to
I like
grab
the zero pricing option. That sounds great.
Yeah, he didn't say anything about low pricing. We don't believe in that model, obviously. But it is the question we answer every day. Why not just spray and pray, right? You're going to get a bazillion people, and the old axiom, reach drives lift. Only problem is, how do you actually measure that? Unless you can tie it back to something tangible, how do you prove it? Beyond the click, and in a business, shame on us that has 41%, click fraud. You've got to get beyond the click. You've got to get this thing down to the transactional level. And we've seen, because we have gone through this process, that there is a premium to be paid, and people will pay if you can prove that they're getting a certain return on their dollar, right? So again, I keep harping back on measurement, which is why this thing is called measurement, as being sort of the key influencer in how these decisions get made. And we're seeing, again, a shift of dollars across mediums, not by basically just convincing them you need to do more here because that's an old world way of doing things. We're starting to run campaigns where we're blending the three together, literally doing a direct mail with a display with a mobile campaign. And now they can actually see the efficacy of one on its own or one or two of them combined. And that pricing conversation is happening less often. Fortunately, I didn't think that day would come either, but it is happening less often, thankfully. And we're starting to see the meter move. We've gone from 25. I'm looking back 2 years ago, right? Average campaign sizes of $25,000, $30,000. We're now doing $250,000 campaigns on average, right? So there are certain benchmarks you're looking for in an industry that says this baby's starting to become real. As soon as you start seeing consistent six-figure deals, at least in our small world, it's starting to feel real. And where you guys are calling us for a change instead of us constantly doing the cattle call through the agency, it's rewarding and starting to tell us that we're starting to reach a little bit of a tipping point. And I don't want to overstate it, but a little bit of a tipping point.
Okay, we have time for basically one question. Because you guys, man, you talk a lot, but that's phenomenal. That's great. For a change, it's not the woman doing all the talking, right? Okay, do we have anybody have a question before we wrap this up? You do, sir?
Hi, it's Adam Chandler from JumpTap. Nice to see you. So we talked about native, we talked about programmatic a little bit. And let's talk about, obviously the digital space right now is divided a little bit between premium and programmatic. So let's talk about them both together at the same time. I think the acquisition of Twitter from MoPub maybe gives them the ability to do native programmatically if that's an area of business they want to get into. Love to get your view, Josh, and others on, do you see those worlds colliding anytime soon? And if so, how long, and what does that mean to the business?
Well, so Jay Sears would kill me if I didn't plug the trading desk panel on Thursday morning. So I do think they're coming together, but I think they're coming together in a somewhat different fashion than I think we've looked at over the last 10 years. that rather than sort of seeing a collapse of premium or a collapse of guaranteed, I don't see any evidence at all that advertisers don't want to continue to have deep integrated contextual owned experiences that they're sponsoring and tying into. What I do see is that we're increasingly having the ability to bring data into those integrations and do really interesting things within them. And so the question in the future won't be premium or programmatic. It will be what percentage of all of your advertising has programmatic optimization layered on top of it.
I think there are efficiencies that come out of both approaches. I'm dealing mostly in the programmatic world, and it has a tremendous amount of unusual complexities, especially for the number of mobile companies that are out there who are selling. And most of them are pulling from mobile exchanges. There really doesn't seem to be a lot of real uniqueness beyond perhaps a black box. I think because of some of the targeting and privacy issues, and certainly not having access to some of the first-party registration data has been really a challenge. It's causing us to even plan differently as an agency, how we flight. In fact, it's much more akin to TV planning in a lot of cases in terms of really effectively looking at mobile from a programmatic way. So really understanding what the value is, but there's certainly a tremendous amount of inventory that's out there. I think the last number I heard was about 70% of programmatic inventory is going still unsold through exchanges, and that's really, really, really high. I think that's very symptomatic of where we need to start ramping up and seeing investments coming out of and changing that number tremendously.
The only thing I'd offer above and beyond what these two gentlemen spoke about is that as supply broadens to include aspects of linear, out of home, certainly audio's been there for a degree of time. You're going to see more marketers trying to figure out how to establish a data-driven strategy around premium and less premium supply, or playing with their mix. And I think that's the key for organizations like ours, where we've been running in that space for a while. We think there's a huge opportunity there, and the opportunity just gets larger when you think about other media types.
All right. Well, hey, thank you. Please thank our panelists, and thank you very much.